And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
As evidenced by the popularity of the new TV series The Walking Dead, zombies are in right now. Hopefully they will get rid of this overflux of vampires we're seeing. Maybe we can start talking more about zombies. But this game, Zombie State, which is very obviously taken from the popular book that was written about the zombies taking over the world, or how the world deals with it. This is the same thing. In this game, you're not fighting zombies like in so many other board games. Instead, as a country, you are making decisions and doing what you can to minimize the destruction that zombies are doing on your nation. So you're not fighting other nations, although you can kind of, nudge and herd zombies in their directions. And there's technology you can get to fight zombies, and it's kind of a resource gathering game mixed. It looks like a war game, but it's not. Yeah. Okay, forget the introduction. Let's just look at the game. Now you can see as world domination games. It is not a world domination game, but that's the idea you'll get when you open up the box. Usually you have a much bigger board. Here the board is decently big, but that's because it's not so big because these technology sheets and these different for each of the players is gigantic. I mean, there's a lot of information that is on these boards. Now, what players are going to do is each player controls a different region that is being attacked by zombies. So we're going to focus on the African States Coalition right now. And you can see that each of the regions here has a die in it. That die represents the population. So South Africa down here has 6 people in it, or 6 million, or whatever number you want to use. Well, this one has a population number of 2. The Sahara Desert only has 1. Players are going to roll each turn to see, or at the beginning, to see where outbreaks are going to start. It almost reminded me of Pandemic in this regard. And then each player will focus up here and say, okay, where are the outbreaks going to happen? So, for example, if I rolled a 12, the outbreak starts in the Sahara. If I roll 1, it would have started in South Africa, and so on and so forth. So these outbreaks are going to come, and zombies are going to start showing up. Now, unfortunately, the game has discs for zombies, and I understand that because you need to flip the discs over to show if the zombies moved or not. But I'm telling you, it's kind of begging for somebody to put in some plastic zombies, like from the game Zombies or something. Just, I don't know, it would add thematically. These zombies, whenever they go into an area, they are going to feed on the people there. So let's say there's 2 zombies in the area where there's a die of 2. They will eat both those people, and there will then be 4 zombies in that area. Losing the die is not a good thing either, because players, every time they lose a die, it comes down to this board. The amount of dice that you have is the amount of action or freedom points that you have. They're called freedom points, but they're basically just actions that you can take each turn. So if I have less than 11 dice, if I have 10 dice, I only get 5 of them. Once I'm down to 7 dice, I only get 4. Once I'm down to 4 dice, I only get 3. And once I'm down to 2 dice, I only get 2 action freedom points. And at that point in time, you pretty much lost anyway. So you don't want the zombies to be destroying your population areas, but what can you do? Well, on your turn, you can do several things. One of them is to bring in the military. Now, military, for some reason, is not very effective against zombies, and so it's usually a 1-to-1 battle. One military can take out a zombie. Although you can fortify military by placing them on their side. That's one of the things that you can do. And that will stop 2 zombies. And you can even make your military more powerful as the game progresses. I should mention that there are random event cards that will be chosen each turn. And as the game progresses, eventually, more outbreaks will happen. But for the most part, players are deciding what they're going to do on their turns. And that's mostly going to push zombies back, maneuver their population around. But the biggest thing is with the board here. And that's the technology. Now you can see there's all different technology that you can have. There's Tier 1, Tier 2, and then at the very bottom we have Tier 3 technology. When you try to find technology, you'll be using some of your resources to find it. You also use your resources to build vehicles. Each of the spaces on the board, and let's focus up here on South Africa, you can see has a dot that gives you, or a circle that shows you what resource that place gives you. And when you start the game, you have all the different resources, although you'll have one more than other people. And you'll take the resource cards at the beginning of each turn, which is kind of similar to Settlers of Catan, as you get these resource cards. And you'll be using these resource cards for both research, for moving, for building tanks on the board. So you need these resources. So to lose the areas on the board that have the resources is going to hurt you because you get fewer of those. But this is where the game really is fascinating to me, is to build these different technologies. When you build a technology, you're only going to be rolling dice. And in case you didn't figure it out from that chart I showed you earlier, dice are 12-sided in this game. And you'll be rolling these dice, and to get a technology initially, you basically just have to get lucky with your die roll. If you fail, then you can put a marker on that to show that you failed that tech, and then next turn you get a better roll towards it. Of course, you have to pay all the resources again until eventually you get the tech. Once you get a couple of the tier level, the tier 1 techs, then you can start building tier 2, and then eventually you can build one of the tier 3. One of the techs that the game provides, and I mention this because it's one of the more powerful technologies, is to place these barricades on the board. And you'll do that for a couple reasons. One, it will stop zombies from moving. Once zombies have feasted on all the people in an area, they're going to be moving to another area. And if you station these right, they may move across the ocean or other places to get to other players who have more than you. That is the extent of the interaction in this game, other than maybe trading or talking to one another. But for the most part, you're not actually attacking each other. You're taking care of your own area, but you might be able to shoo the zombies out of your area into your opponent's arena. And so that's one of the things you can do with technologies. Other than that, there's quite a few technologies, but here's one of the biggest problems with the game. Actually, it's probably the biggest problem, is that there's medical breakthroughs, military advancements in physics and science, and so on and so forth. But frankly, some of these techs are way better than the other ones. I really don't understand how they're supposed to be even at all. Putting out those walls is a good technology. Being able to pick an area and just quarantine that area where nobody else can get into it, that's much better than some of the other ones, which just seem kind of weak comparatively. And I mean, the players, everyone I played it with agreed on that it was just, it's an interesting idea, but that they just weren't well balanced. Not to mention the fact that if you fail on your roll for technologies several turns in a row, you are way behind the curve of someone else. Sure, you'll probably get a technology the 4th time. You're not going to fail that many times in a row. But at the same time, you know, you're trying to win the game. Rolls shouldn't be that big of a deal. There's a lot of features I like about this game. I like the mutation track here. As the zombies mutate and more outbreaks occur, and the faster someone is doing with technology, the more and more they're provoking the zombies. And the idea of shuttling zombies towards the other players is interesting, but that flaw with the technology is one of the biggest problems with the game. Okay, major props for this game having such a great theme. I mean, there's enough zombie games out there where let's fight off the zombies, and there's been some interesting takes on the matter like Mall of Horror, where you're voting who gets thrown to the zombies. But this deals with it on a global scale. That just has always fascinated me. You know, yeah, it's interesting, I guess, to see a couple people hold up in a house and how do they survive the zombies. But what's going on massively? And this game deals with that. But it's just, there's a few problems. I already mentioned one with technology. That's the major problem. The other problem is the game just seems to run slow. And in a game with zombies, you kind of want things to be maybe a little bit more action-packed. And just by the time everyone takes their turn and decides what to do, I would have preferred if there had been a bit more simultaneous things going on and players decided at the same time. And I hurried people through. And honestly, the game's not horrible. I like it. I like the idea of pushing the zombies away and such. It's just that once we figured out what the best technologies were, it seemed like it was just pretty obvious. I'm sure after I write this review, maybe a fan of the game will come on and say, but if you do this combo, and that's possible. It's possible I missed something. But like I said, being able to quarantine an area, that's powerful. That's way more powerful than making your tanks better defensively or being able to add resources to land. I mean, those are useful abilities, and I thought everything was neat, but man, quarantining, that's the best. And then again, failing your technology 3 turns into the game is really frustrating, and I wish there had been maybe one free tech that you start with or something to that regard. Well, be that as it may, this may be your style game, but I think that the people who are going to like this game it's a small group, because Risk players, there's not a lot of combat in this, so they're not going to be big fans of it. People who like the technology tree are going to be run into the same thing that I did, where they're going to find holes there. Great components. Artwork is so-so, but it's an interesting game, just not a very good one.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.